World War II was a global conflict of unprecedented scale. It tested the limits of human endurance and reshaped the geopolitical landscape. At the helm of the Allied forces stood three towering figures: Winston Churchill, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and Joseph Stalin. These men, each a product of their unique upbringing and experiences, would forge a complex and often tumultuous partnership. Their shared goal? To defeat the Axis powers. Their personal ambitions and ideologies, however, often clashed, creating a fascinating dynamic that played out on the world stage. This essay will delve into the lives of these leaders, examining their relationships, rivalries, and the lasting impact they had on the course of the war and the world order that followed. Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister, was a man steeped in tradition. Born into aristocracy, Churchill's life was marked by both privilege and adversity. He had a deep-seated belief in British exceptionalism and the virtues of the empire. A gifted orator, Churchill possessed a remarkable ability to rally the British people with his stirring speeches. He was a staunch defender of democracy and individual liberty, seeing Nazi Germany as a threat to the very foundations of Western civilization. Churchill's leadership style was characterized by unwavering determination, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. He was known for his quick wit, his love of cigars and brandy, and his often prickly demeanor. Churchill's early years were marked by a mix of ambition and setbacks. He served in the military, worked as a journalist, and entered politics, rising through the ranks to become Prime Minister in 1940. When World War II broke out, Churchill was thrust into the role of wartime leader. He rallied the British people to stand firm against Nazi aggression, famously declaring that Britain would never surrender. Across the Atlantic, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the longest-serving president in American history, led the United States. Roosevelt, known as FDR, came from. However, his life took a dramatic turn when he was stricken with polio in his late 30s. This experience left him with a profound empathy for the struggles of ordinary people. Roosevelt's political philosophy was rooted in pragmatism and a belief in the power of government to improve the lives of its citizens. He implemented a series of social welfare programs known as the New Deal, aimed at lifting the United States out of the Great Depression. Roosevelt's leadership style was characterized by his charisma, his ability to connect with people from all walks of life, and his unwavering optimism. He was a master of persuasion and compromise, skilled at navigating the complexities of American politics. In the East, Joseph Stalin ruled the Soviet Union with an iron fist. Stalin's early life was one of hardship and brutality. He was born into poverty in Georgia and became involved in revolutionary politics at a young age. Stalin's rise to power within the Communist Party was marked by ruthlessness and cunning. He eliminated his rivals through purges and show trials, consolidating his control over the Soviet Union. Stalin's leadership was defined by paranoia, a deep mistrust of the West, and an unwavering belief in the superiority of the communist system. He transformed the Soviet Union into a totalitarian state, suppressing dissent and controlling all aspects of life. Under his rule, millions of Soviet citizens were killed or sent to labor camps in the name of collectivization and ideological purity. Section 5. A Clash of Titans: Early Tensions and Cooperation. The alliance between Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin was one of necessity rather than natural affinity. They came from vastly different backgrounds, represented contrasting political systems, and harbored deep suspicions of one another. Churchill, the staunch imperialist, viewed Stalin's communist regime with suspicion and distaste. Roosevelt, the pragmatic idealist, recognized the need to work with Stalin to defeat Hitler. However, he remained wary of the Soviet leader's ambitions. Despite their differences, the three leaders understood that their common enemy, Nazi Germany, posed an existential threat to their respective nations. The early years of the war were marked by a sense of urgency and a shared desire to defeat Hitler. They exchanged intelligence, coordinated military strategies, and provided each other with material support. The United States, though initially hesitant to enter the war, began providing lend-lease aid to Britain and the Soviet Union. Section 6. The Tehran Conference, a turning point. The Tehran Conference in 1943 marked a pivotal moment in the relationship between the Allied leaders. This was the first time that all three leaders met face-to-face. The conference aimed to solidify Allied strategy for the remainder of the war. One of the key outcomes of the Tehran Conference was the agreement on Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Normandy, which would open up a second front in Western Europe. This was a major concession from Stalin, who had been pushing for a second front for some time. The Tehran Conference also witnessed the emergence of personal relationships between the leaders. Roosevelt in particular seemed to develop a rapport with Stalin. He saw the Soviet leader as a potential partner in the post-war world. Churchill, however, remained deeply suspicious of Stalin's intentions, believing that the Soviet leader was more interested in expanding his influence than in genuine cooperation. Section 7. Cracks in the alliance, growing distrust. As the war progressed and victory seemed more attainable, the cracks in the Allied alliance began to widen. The shared threat of Nazi Germany had papered over their ideological differences and personal suspicions. However, with the end of the war in sight, these underlying tensions resurfaced. Stalin's ambitions in Eastern Europe became increasingly evident. The Soviet army, having borne the brunt of the fighting against Germany, occupied much of Eastern Europe. Stalin, determined to create a buffer zone between the Soviet Union and the West, began installing communist regimes in the countries under his control. This expansionism alarmed Churchill and Roosevelt, who feared that Stalin was intent on spreading communism throughout Europe. The liberation of Eastern Europe, which Churchill had envisioned as a triumph of freedom over tyranny, was turning into a source of new divisions and anxieties. Section 8. The Yalta Conference, shaping the post-war world. The Yalta Conference, held in February 1945, took place against a backdrop of both triumph and trepidation. The Allied victory in Europe was imminent. However, the question of how to shape the post-war world loomed large. The conference aimed to address a range of pressing issues, including the future of Germany, the establishment of the United Nations, and the fate of Eastern Europe. At Yalta, the seeds of the Cold War were sown. Stalin, emboldened by the Red Army's advances and determined to secure Soviet interests, drove a hard bargain. He agreed to enter the war against Japan in exchange for territorial concessions in the Far East. He also insisted on Soviet influence in Eastern Europe, effectively paving the way for the establishment of Soviet satellite states. Roosevelt, weakened by illness and eager to secure Soviet cooperation against Japan, made significant concessions to Stalin. Churchill, sensing the shifting balance of power and deeply troubled by Stalin's ambitions, found himself increasingly isolated. Section 9. Victory and its aftermath, the price of peace. The war in Europe finally came to an end in May 1945 with Germany's unconditional surrender. The Allied victory was a testament to the courage and sacrifice of millions of people. However, the celebrations were tempered by the sobering realities of a world shattered by war and the looming uncertainties of the post-war order. The alliance that had defeated Nazi Germany began to unravel with alarming speed. The wartime partnership between the Western powers and the Soviet Union, forged in the crucible of conflict, gave way to suspicion, mistrust, and ultimately, open hostility. The promises made at Yalta, particularly regarding the future of Eastern Europe, proved difficult to enforce. Stalin, determined to consolidate Soviet power in the region, installed communist governments and cracked down on any dissent. The dream of a free and democratic Eastern Europe, cherished by many, was brutally extinguished. Section 10. Legacies of leadership, a mixed bag. The legacies of Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin are complex and multifaceted. Churchill, the eloquent defender of freedom, is remembered for his unwavering resolve. Roosevelt, the pragmatic idealist, transformed American society with his New Deal programs. Stalin, the ruthless dictator, turned the Soviet Union into a global superpower. Their legacies continue to cast long shadows over history. Section 11. Conclusion, the enduring impact. The personal dynamics between Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin had a profound impact on the course of World War II and its aftermath. Their relationships, marked by a mix of cooperation, rivalry, and suspicion, shaped the key decisions made during the war. Their differing visions for the post-war world laid the groundwork for the decades-long geopolitical standoff known as the Cold War. The clash of their egos, played out on the world stage, had consequences that continue to resonate today. Understanding their complex relationships, their strengths, their weaknesses, and their flaws is essential for comprehending the complexities of the 20th century and the challenges that continue to shape our world.